Come to order. I'd like to welcome our visitors and staff and to this meeting on March, what's the date, 9th? Yep. And this is the meeting of the District Advisory Committee. And we are convened remotely by Zoom, and we are being recorded. So we will be having Zoom chat later in the meeting. And if you're interested, let us know to speak at that time. And our first item then would be reading and approval of the meeting summaries. So are there any thoughts or questions about the first one? And I didn't quite understand the difference. The first one is the actual meeting summary, and the second one we don't have to approve, which is the list of comments. Okay, good. So the February 9th meeting summary. Entertain a motion.
Grover, I have one change. I saw one little thing. I think it's page 5. It's my thing. It's supposed to be subsidizing, not subsiding. Page 5.
Well, they're not page. The numbers aren't pages. Is the one that starts off, this isn't a library discussion meeting?
No, it's actually the first page of the, the actual first page of the dialogue.
Okay. And is that actually included as part of our meeting summary? I guess, sure.
Yeah, and it's the last Ryan Stee. There's there's a lot of Ryan Stee on here. It's the last Ryan Stee on that page, and it's just the second sentence. It's subsiding. The park isn't subsiding. It's
yes.
Thank goodness.
Subsidizing is probably the word you wanted, huh?
Easy fix.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
That's all I got. I make a motion to approve.
All right, Grady. Thanks. I'll second. So looking for any dissension? Good, then we call it approved. Didn't say that quite the way it's supposed to, but got the gist of it. Next item is the draft proposed budget in the new format. And so this is the approved budget that we're just going to review, or are we going to review and have a comment about it? Because I noticed in the timeline, I think this is when we're supposed to just review it. No approving or agreeing or whatnot at this point. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah. In the timeline, this is the budget that I have not even had a chance to talk to the county administrator with yet. And so I wanted to give you an idea of the overall budget, how it was looking in changes, and then hopefully engage and spend most of our focus on talking about the capital projects and the capital repair and replace projects that we are recommending for next year, because in the interim between now and when I meet with the county administrator, and then there's a couple of weeks even after that, changes can be made and additions can be made. This is looking at my first operational annual budget. This is my first set of recommendations for how I think we need to move forward. And I do have Elizabeth Gomez here for both this discussion, if there's specific financial questions, and the next one on the second quarter report, if there's any questions that she can specifically have. So Jessica, or who was going to pull up the PowerPoint? I'm not sure if that was.
While we're waiting for that, I had a question in the flow. So is there a point at some point that the DAC says we advocate for that going forward or something? Because it's review, but I don't see where it says the adoption is from the board of directors.
Right, and the way I understood it was before that April 13th it says review proposed budget, but I believe, is that the time, Elizabeth, that we would be asking them for making a recommendation?
I believe so.
I think that's, yeah.
I haven't had to present the budget to the DAC before going to the budget committee, so it's a new process for me.
Okay,
But yes,
As long
our
as we're
intent is that is our intent is once we get to a point now, if something happens where timelines get shifted on the county side, we may be coming to you after the fact. I'm not sure, but that's why I wanted to get this to you as early as we could, but not get too far ahead of not being able to make changes. So,
Great. Then, and to clarify why I was asking that question is we want to know when we are actually giving our affirmation, et cetera, as opposed to that we reviewed it did not mean that we did that. And I just want to keep
Right.
those things clear. Thanks.
Yep. Yeah,
I
and
have it up
today,
on-
again, I would love suggestions or comments or thoughts for me to consider putting into the budget before I meet with the county administrator. So,
Heather, you had your hand up for a minute ago.
I didn't know if I needed to help share. It sounds like Elizabeth has it.
I have it
Okay.
up when you're ready, Mike.
okay. Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. Again, my intent, I'm going to go through some of these slides quicker than others. The difficulty, as we've talked about in our overall budget, is that we are still using the county's budget structure. But because we have multiple funds with interfund transfers and stuff, it makes it difficult to understand some of these slides. So we've created a few other slides to put it into better context. Next slide. And everybody knows our mission. We're enriching our community vitality and promoting healthy living through parks and recreation. This is where we're at right now, the budget calendar, reviewing the requested or proposed budget with the DAC. I'll be meeting with the county administrator in, I think, a week and a half to go over the budget for the first time with him. Then he has review periods and we'll be making changes during that time. And then, yes, as you see, hopefully April 13th, that review proposed budget will come forward as an action item in the meeting. Next slide. So just on a general trending level, and just as a reminder, we're funded by a permanent dedicated tax base. Our property taxes, we forecast are remaining steady at an increase of 3%. Collections have been higher on property taxes in the last couple of years, higher than normal in the last couple of years. We hope that as we're now coming out of COVID, we're going to see everything start to be a little more revitalized, including, fees and charges and all of that. Our expenditure trends, most of our expenditures outside of interfund transfers that show as expenditures, most of our expenditures this upcoming year are driven by the fringe benefit cost increases, PERS contributions, the COLA, the cost of living adjustment, and then just generally our cost of doing business between utilities and supplies and all of that. But we'll talk about how that affects the general fund here in a couple of slides. We do continue on our general fund balance. We continue to be mindful of our ending fund balance and making all attempts to reduce our costs. Our general fund has consistently grown since 14-15, and we showed you that a couple of months ago, reflecting that we've kept our operational expenses within operational revenues each year. Next slide. This is just a review of the information everybody we've gone over. We have 5 funds. Our general fund, our 3 SDC funds, 1 for each of the zones, and then our capital projects fund. Our general structure, as you see here, and these are what you'll see both in these slides and in our budget, our new budget book that'll come out. We have our NCPRD administration, which actually is not just me and Jessica. It's finance, it's our marketing and communications, it's our HR folks, and makes up that portion. Then we have our programs and community centers, older adult services, parks, trails, and natural areas, and our planning and development division. So this is the summary of what we've requested and put into the budget for me to have the conversation with the county administrator. But this is all of our funds combined. This is the one that makes it difficult because this is how the county rolls things up. This is all of the funds combined. And they consider interfund interfund transfers as essentially an expense in one area and a revenue in another area. So it doesn't tell a full picture. I do want to show you that generally, though, we've kept our costs as low as we could, but this is very confusing to look at. I think the next slide, Elizabeth, and if people want to go back to this one to look at, we can go back. But this is really what I wanted us to look at, is that when we remove all of the transfers, and Elizabeth put a great note down here, I'm just going to read it so that everybody's aware. Accounting standards require the items to be recorded in separate funds, but for reporting purposes, interfund activity is eliminated from government-wide financial statements. Because without careful consideration of the treatment of interfund activity within the budget, the casual user may misunderstand the size of the budget or scale of interfund activity. So this page is we're presenting the budget changes by fund without the interfund transfers to help you better understand the actual changes that I'm proposing to the budget. So within the general fund, we are requesting $184 additional than what we had last year. It's a 1.7% change, even though we had a lot of increased costs and as far as just even general inflationary stuff. But in addition to that, I'm also requesting that we added 4 additional full-time employees and a realignment of how we're structured managerially wise, plus those increases to utilities and maintenance, et cetera, that we had talked about. The 4 additional FTEs, just so that everybody understands what I'm requesting, and why we only are increasing by $184,000 with all of those, is several of the FTE positions are combining and using either part-time staff that we're not going to fill, or partial positions in within the district that we're combining to make a full-time position. But the main positions are that we're requesting is a program manager position that is going to be overseeing under the recreation and facilities services category, would be handling all programming and community programs specifically. That's slightly different than how we have it set up right now. But really effectively, part of the realignment is we're clearly defining the 3 distinct functions within recreation, which are sports, aquatics, and recreation programs. And so adding this additional program supervisor is going to help us both in our overall programs. Part of their initial effort is going to be getting programs up and running at Concord as well. Another position that we're requesting is in the planning and development division, and that's for a community engagement specialist. This is a position that is somebody that has a planning background, project management type of background or planning background, but that really knows and has expertise in how to reach out to the community in all ways, using every tool for engaging all the BIPOC, LGBTQ, any of the marginalized communities, but also engaging on with the whole district on all of these efforts. And what we've observed and my recommendation and observations is we need somebody who's specialized in that, and not even necessarily that as a specialty, but somebody that has the training to be able to do that, but somebody that's their dedicated job within the district. We have a lot of projects that we want to be able to get off the ground. We need somebody that can consistently get out and gather information, engage the community, work on these ongoing things. The other 2 positions that we're requesting, one is in the pool and adds a pool supervisor position on. Because of the realignment, we would be having some upgrades to other positions, and so this would provide some I believe daytime staff stability, and this is one of the ones where we're not hiring a couple of part-time staff. And then the last position is a full-time building maintenance assistant position that is going to work in several facilities, but is a combination of, and I'm getting them mixed up, but there was one like 0.3 job and 1.7 job, and Both of them, I think, were temporary. So this is to try and get a more stable position, a more stable a job with benefits. I'm recommending that be made into a full-time FTE. So altogether, with all of those changes and inflationary costs and other expenses, and I'll even say with an eye towards increasing our budget for things like training, so that we can get some staff development going again as we're coming out of COVID, so people can go to conferences. It has a 1.7% change difference from last year's budget. Where you see the big changes, and you see them below, are in the SDC funding. There's an additional $2 million. And Elizabeth, correct me if I'm wrong, that is based on just our performance from the past years and then our inflationary estimate for next year.
That's an increase to the expenses, so that would be for the transfers today.
Oh,
not the
that's because we're
transfers, I'm sorry.
transferring.
That's
Got it,
the
sorry.
yeah, it's a small increase to the fees. So we pay a 2% fee for the SDCs that we collect. And then really the balance is future capital projects.
Okay. And we'll talk about money, how we've done all these transfers here in a little bit. Out of our capital, or in our capital 480 budget, we're increasing capital project dollar amounts, some of them because projects hopefully are going to be starting to spend capital dollars this upcoming fiscal year. So you see a 22% increase in capital expenses. And then our general fund contingency reserve. So at the end of the fiscal year, we expect to have a large general fund reserve fund balance. So what I'm requesting or putting into my proposed budget is to take and keep a good reserve in our general fund, because we don't want to drain that, so that if something comes up, we don't have money to account for it. And we do have a 15% contingency. And I believe, Elizabeth, rough numbers is we're at about a 45% contingency left at the end of this fiscal year, just right around $4 to $4.5 million.
Correct.
But we transferred money out of the general fund into put some of it into a reserve, put some of it into contingency, and we'll cover that a little bit later on, and hopefully it'll make more sense. All right, next slide. So these next few slides, I'm going to zip through fairly quickly. These are just more breakdowns that look at it by function, by those 5 subheadings. So within NCPRD administration, the only thing I wanted to draw your eye to is the reason that it looks like it increased so much is because administration is where, and I may not be saying this exactly right, where the transfer happens. That $4 million that I'm requesting be put into a reserve for future expenditures, essentially just holding on to that amount and not able to spend it next year, is reflected in here. That's where there it is, the $4.180 million contingency that we're left with, and then 2.9, almost $3 million in transfers out of the general fund, in addition to that $4 million transfer or reserve. Next slide. So programs and community centers. Again, really not much of note on changes here, just minor inflationary and cost of doing business changes. Next slide. Older adult services, a slightly higher increase, but again, nothing that's really unexpected as we're looking at coming out of COVID, and costs for goods and services and personnel do go up. Next slide. Our parks, trails, and natural areas, again, a slight increase overall to the general category. Nothing again of real note, just general inflationary costs. Next slide.
Question.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. So I look at, as an example, under maintenance and services, and we look at 1920 being 660,000. And then we look at 21-22 being almost twice that, and then another increase. What what is why the big difference between
Sure.
1920 and where we are? Because I see the 4.3, but if you
Yeah.
went from 19 to 20, it's a big difference.
Right, and Elizabeth, correct me. I'll take a stab at this. Let me know if I'm off, because I think I know the answer. It has to do with what we budgeted versus what our actuals were. So the first two columns are showing what our actual budget numbers were
Correct.
when the budgets were rolled up.
Uh-huh.
But the adopted budgets, I'm guessing if we looked, were higher than that. If
We
I'm
also-
remembering my charts. Elizabeth,
Mike,
you want to fill in?
We also decided in 21, 22 to move all of the utility costs for all of our facilities into parks maintenance, so that we could better gauge the utility costs, the maintenance costs, control contracts and things like that. So what you'll see, and excuse my dog, sorry, what you'll see is that the utility costs have been moved from older adult services and pool and things like that into the maintenance budget.
Okay, so I appreciate why actuals are different than adopted. I'm just curious of why there's such a big gap between adopted and assuming that 2021 adopted was also, adopted was higher, and same with 1920. Why do we have such a big gap between what the actuals ended up being? And let me rephrase that. Will 21, 22 come in significantly under the adopted?
It shouldn't, because 21, 22 is reflecting the move of all of the utilities and the building maintenance into this program. It's
Okay.
taking it out of the other programs. So you'll see that if you look at the budget, you'll see those zeroed out, and then you'll see an increase. So we just moved those expenses from one program to another.
So it's an artificial increase. It's really a move from several funds into one that accounted for the bulk of that increase that year.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Sure. Next slide. So in our planning and development division here, we do have increase to personnel services. That's a larger jump than you see, but that's because this is where one of the positions what is being requested to add. But generally, the rest of everything other than the capital outlay and the transfers, and even the transfers are not that much different from last year. In fact, they're slightly less. But the big changes that you see is in the capital outlay. Last year's budget that was adopted was a $17.4 million estimate of what we would spend. This year is 22.2. And we'll go through what those projects are, and Heather's on here to answer any questions if there's specifics that I can't or Elizabeth can't answer on the capital stuff. But you see, again, generally trending along with the rest of the departments about the same in most of the other functions. Next slide. So the capital improvement projects, what we tried to do, and if you did not see, we sent you a new set of slides right before this meeting. I apologize. I wanted to get it out to you earlier than that, but I wanted to make sure there were no last minute other changes. But generally, what we tried to do was just move forward the projects that we had in last year's budget. Because we haven't had our full capital improvement project discussion and all of this, I used these as this was what the body that approved the budget last year agreed to. So let's move them forward and keep. And some of them it's because we've got them ongoing, like SDC methodology and Milwaukee Bay Park and Concord. But some of these others that hadn't gotten off the start or go. We're hoping that by filling in some of these personnel gaps that we've got in authorized staff in planning and development. Right now, we've got a senior planner position and a project manager position that are both vacant right now. We're hoping that we can fill those and actually get some of these other projects going in a much more forward direction. What is missing off of here that you all had seen in the first version was I was trying to figure out how to reflect that we had 2 projects on this list from last year that were Scott Park and Dogwood Park that are now being handled and fully developed and designed and built by the city of Milwaukee. And in that original, when I had kept those on, I said, well, we should probably also have a discussion about the Bowman Bray and Balfour parks as well. In retrospect, I took those off in this version because again, all 4 of those are realistically, we are there in kind of maintenance and operations consulting team mode. We're there as part of the design group, but they're doing all the heavy lifting, and so I just took those off. So what we're left with are these 6 projects, and then 2 additional projects in the next slide. But does anybody have any questions about these that are on here? I know they're all things that everybody's talked about before. Grover, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I was just curious, and it may come up later, but so when we use, as an example, Jennings Lodge School or the district ball fields, and there was something about trails as well that I remember from the past, but in either case, are we going to, in the next item, when we're talking about the second quarter actual, so we still have the third and fourth quarter of this fiscal year, and
Yes.
so we'll be able to talk about how Jennings Lodge School District Ball Field and the trails plan, and
Yes.
it's okay, good. I'll
Yep.
wait till then.
Yeah, and again, realistically, Chair, I guess my overall point is outside of Milwaukee Bay Park and Concord and the SDC methodology that's ongoing, we just have not had the staff capacity to move forward really in any measurable way on any of those others. And I've reprioritized staff so that they can focus on what needs to get focused on. And until we can get these additional staff positions filled, some of these things are still going to lag. But with that said, we're trying to make forward motion on as much as we can, as quickly as we can. And yet, you're right, we're halfway through the third quarter, but we still have basically 4 months, 4.5 months of the fiscal year, and things may move forward in a meaningful way. But this is the outlay that we're looking at, what projects we would focus on for next year's budget expenditures, systems plan. Just to give you a heads up, we're really trying to figure out how to do this systems plan so that it's meaningful, that is not too overreaching as our first lift. And so right now we're looking at potentially breaking it into 2 different phases, a short term that we would do first, a 0 to 5 year phase, and then a longer term one that looks out to the 15 to 20 years. Because for us to try and do all of it, even if we were fully staffed, with all of the other things that we're needing to do with capital improvement plan and SDCs and all of this, I'm afraid that it's going to just get too muddied up. But we're not set on that. We have money in the systems plan. We're requesting additional funding in the systems plan for next year, so that we can look at potentially outsourcing as much of that as possible. I just don't know right now. My recommendation was to keep it in at the dollar amount. There was 300,000 in it last year. We're requesting 400,000 this year as a good, for example. That's one that I remember. SDC methodology you've seen, and we're under contract right now with that. That's due to be finished by the end of the year. Milwaukee Bay Park and Concord, we have updates on those later on of where it's at now, but there's actual dollar expenditures that we're hoping to spend in the next fiscal year in a significant way towards both of those, hopefully. And then Jennings Lodge school improvements and the district ball fields, those were on from last year. They're still a high priority. With the sale of Hoodview, we are in a ball field deficit for NCPRD based on the community's even past use. It's much reduced with the Hoodview property. And so it's been on the list for many, many years, it looks like, but we just don't know exactly how to move forward in it. But I wanted to keep it on there to just keep that momentum forward. Grover?
Yeah, quick question. You mentioned the SDC methodology by the end of the year. Do you mean fiscal year or calendar year?
Calendar year. I mean, our best estimate is August, September for getting that fully completed.
Okay, because that was relevant to when the zones are going to be eliminated.
Exactly.
Conversations.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. But
So
that's not gonna, best case scenario has nothing that we would get done by July 1st.
Okay,
If
good.
only for the fact that we have our 90-day review period that's mandated to do that. So those were the current ones. I'm not seeing hands going up. So let's switch to the next slide. I did want to, based on the fact that I've been hearing you and I've been hearing the community on a couple of projects that weren't on last year's list. I did not request a lot of money in either one of these, but I did want to put some money in towards the initial community engagement and initial planning efforts for it. So I believe there's 150,000 in one and 100,000 in another. Those were just guesses. And the way that our budget works is if we need to, I can always go back to the board and request if I think that we've missed that, if we can't find that any extra money elsewhere. But it wasn't to get us to a full design where we can start constructing right away. This is really to do that initial. I've heard justice property, but I can't tell you really exactly what the community wants for that. And so we need to engage the community in that. And so same thing with New Urban High School. I've driven by, I think I know the park property that we're talking about, but we need to engage both with the school district on how that would work, and then with the community on what the park would look like.
Ryan, your hand is up.
Yeah, Michael, is this the right time to just ask you a couple quick questions about the system plan, or is there a space further along?
No, I mean, we can.
Okay, just a few comments. It sounds like you have about 400,000 generally budgeted for that process.
Correct. Well, 300 right now. I'm requesting an additional 100 next year. Yes.
Okay, and then that would roll over if you don't get to the project, right? Okay,
exactly.
And then so doing like, are you thinking? This interesting idea of splitting it up, is that first 5 years maybe, is that more of a strategic plan to while you're building up to then create the actual system plan?
What it really is trying to identify what we need most, and to me what we need most is a needs assessment and a fully developed full district-wide needs assessment that is statistically validated, has reached all areas of the community. That's the first one. The data that we derive from the needs assessment should also help us drive the CIP process to get our CIP list fully vetted. And if we can get those two in the next year and a half, that's going to set us up then, and we'll still use the information that we get from the needs assessment to develop that second phase of the longer term strategy. But to try and have one product that at the end we had the fully developed system plan, as comprehensive, including trails and CIP and operational plans or feasibility studies and the needs assessment. I just think that breaking them up into two chunks is a way to go. It may not be. One company may be able to say, hey, we can do it, we'll just do it in 2 lifts. But right now that was the direction that we really need. I need to know what the community, what the district wants. And we need to have a good capital outlay so that we can start talking in the future about bonds and how to actually put those desires into effect.
So then I guess the last question I have is, would that, since there's a needs assessment, and there's a lot of nuance in that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Especially around marginalized communities, would that include like focusing on that equity-based engagement? Okay.
Specifically focusing. And that's why I think I would love to take more careful time on that needs assessment to really, instead of, I mean, I've done the standard models of a couple of focus group meetings, a couple of stakeholder meetings. We develop, SWOT analyses, data from those, and then we develop the survey, and we send the survey out until we get our minimum amount to make it statistically valid, and then we derive a lot of information from that. And there's a lot of key engagement, equity, diversity engagement steps that you and I both know are missed in that model. And what I'm hoping to do is, even if it takes us a few extra months to do that, really truly engaged, having specific meetings in the Spanish language out in the communities not just saying, well, we translated a form and told people they can fill it out. It's those nuances of wanting to really be careful, considerate, and compassionate with how we develop this needs assessment, because I want that document to guide us for easily the next 5 to 8 years. By then, communities probably change and we need to do it again. But hopefully, if we develop this process really well, it can be almost a continuous feedback type of thing.
Yeah, creating those relationships.
Exactly.
So I'm going to speak up just for the rest of the group that 400,000 is if there's anything that we support, I suggest we support is funding this project, because 400,000 sounds like a lot. It's not.
Goes very quickly.
Yeah, you can almost do double that just to the group. So okay, thank you for the answers there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Before we go on to the next slide, are there other capital improvement, large projects that we may have missed or that you would like to see? Even again, if we only are looking at engagement and initial planning, or things that you think that shouldn't be on there and that we should put off to the side for a year, or any of that. I'm more than open for any of those kind of comments, which you can either give now, or if you think about it afterwards, send me an email after the meeting. Ben, I think Ben had his hand up first.
Yeah, thanks. This isn't really a specific comment or question about the presentation, but I just wanted to let you all know I have a work open house for a project that I have to jump off at 6:15. And so I didn't want to disrupt the flow, and I thought this was a good spot to interject because we kind of just jumped right in. And so I did ask Desi if he would, if a vote comes up, me leaving isn't going to create a botch in the quorum. I asked Desi if he'd be okay to, if I were to give him my vote, if anything comes up, and he said okay. So I think if that's applies to the Robert's Rules of Order, then that's kind of what I would like.
Well, I actually don't know that we have, what do you call that when somebody
Proxy.
else? I don't think we have proxies approved in our bylaws. So I appreciate it, and I doubt if we're going to come down to a vote that's one vote would make one way or difference in the other, but I appreciate you having that conversation with Desi.
Yeah, and I was not seeking a vote today, really just, again, feedback, because the budget is still very fluid.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Anita.
Yeah, just seeing this and what you were saying, Mike, I'm just reminded that there was talk about a form or a way for people to nominate projects, people in the community. And I don't know the status of that right now.
That's for the big capital improvement planning, not for what we're looking at doing for next year's budget. We're using the existing CIP list as it was, but that big process is part of what we would be doing in this community engagement, needs assessment, capital projects planning as part of the systems plan. Is that fully engaged? That's part of the way to really get as many voices out there telling us what they're wanting.
Cool. I'd also like to say that I'm really happy to hear about this district-wide equity-based, diversity-based needs assessment for the systems plan.
It's
We really need that,
it's
and
really exciting.
I think that's going to be so cool.
I agree. Okay, next slide. I think we're coming right to the end here. So the last one that I wanted to highlight are what I call the happy joy projects. These are what we're doing out in the parks, in the community, not of a large capital thing where there's big groundbreakings, but this is our capital repair and replacement budget. And so these are the projects that we'll be really promoting when they're going on by putting up signage and highlighting, hey, these are your district tax dollars at work. We're listening. This is what it is. And in the budget book, there will be breakouts that fully describe these projects, but I just wanted to have a chance to go through them quickly. Altamonte Park, there's actually 2 projects set for next year to replace a piece of playground equipment that's rotting. So that's really not a full replacement of all the playground, just a specific replacement of that piece that's not good anymore. And then also out at Altamonte Park is repair to the bark chip trail and do that to decrease impacts to the pollinator beds. Outside of Altamonte, we're looking at 6 to 8 developed areas to remulch and revitalize the mulch beds, relining and restriping our tennis, basketball, and pickleball courts district-wide, updating signage in parks, part of it in response to House Bill 3115, where we're no longer able to enforce a park rule prohibiting overnight camping. We have to change the rules, and we're not set exactly on how that is. We're still working with legal, but we do know that that's going to be a fairly expensive sign replacement because we're going to have to do it district-wide at all of our facilities and parks. Tree planting and ice storm repairs, we're going to still continue grinding stumps and replacing trees in multiple areas. Restoring and repairing pollinator beds. I think there's 3 that are on the list for this upcoming year, maybe 4, for maintaining and adding interpretive signage. Our engineered wood fiber, which is the wood chip fiber stuff that you see in the playground play material itself. We're looking at replacing those in 12 of our parks. We did a big chunk, I think 6 or 8 of them a couple of years ago. This should take care of another big chunk, and we may need to do another one next year. Trolley trail repair and maintenance. We do have some money in there to do some needed updates for safety improvements. We're also looking at purchasing a zero-turn mower, replacing sand filters at the aquatic park. A really exciting project, but we do need to put it on because it is a capital repair and replace. Seal coating our driveway out at our North Clackamas maintenance shed. And then Boardman interpretive signs. There's been plans to put out educational signs, so we would be creating and installing those. And those are the main projects that we are anticipating that are of the capital repair expenditure level. So not just kind of normal day-to-day maintenance stuff.
Monica, you have a question?
Yeah, about the zero-turn mower. I think in Lake Oswego and also in the city of Milwaukee, equipment is being replaced with electric equipment. And I wondered if that was the plan for this zero-turn mower, and if there might be some way, some rebate or something from PGE that would help cover the expense of that.
Yeah, the battery operated, the electric equipment that's most likely being replaced in all of these, as we have started to do as well, is on the small equipment, the blowers, the string trimmers, the hedge clippers, and even small push mowers. There's not the technology out there really that makes it effective for any of the riders or the zero-turn mowers. The battery drainage is so high that you spend as much time replacing the batteries and trying to keep them charged and swapping them out. It's not there yet. Industry, I have a friend that works in Toro headquarters. The industry is indicating that there's some new batteries that are going to be coming out, or new technology on these that are going to make that more feasible in the next 3 years. But we do have a commitment that we're starting to switch out our other equipment as it's applicable. Some of them are better than others in what we're doing, because it's not just kind of casual yard maintenance that one might do in their house. Our equipment goes through a pretty good beating of use. So we're going to be getting there. It is a commitment of mine, same as looking at replacing our fleet vehicles with electric vehicles and doing everything we can to be more green.
I had a quick question as well on the last item down there, not about Boardman in specific, but it's the one I know the best of those choices. So there is the education center part of it, and there's the playground center part of it, and then there's the walkway part of it, and then there's the overall site. And are we, 'cause it came up when we were talking about the Concord in other meetings, that there's going to be multiple things there. Are we going to be working on, because there were some great suggestions, as an example, of a woman who did oodles of work with young people in the area, volunteered, her last name is Briggs, and she has since passed away, but to name the educational port of it, not the park, but the educational port of after her. I'm not asking to solve that now, but if we're going to spend money to buy signs, I think we ought to solve those issues before we do. And then the walkway could have a different name, and then the whole site could have a different name. We haven't gotten to that. But when you put on there, you're going to spend money on it. I'd like us to slow down and make sure we're clear about using that as an example. And I don't know where else that would apply.
Right, and I think the intent on these are the interpretive educational signs. So as you're walking along the boardwalk,
Okay.
it'll be pointing out, aquatic life or
Okay.
birds or particular plants that are of interest.
Right.
But again, you all can name whatever whatever bits and pieces of parks you want. So if you want
Right.
to have a specific naming for the boardwalk, that's totally something that.
Or the educational center, because it says educational signage, and that was the only reason I brought it up. But,
Yeah,
but that's,
yep.
I understand what you're saying, and that sounds great.
And I believe
Dave, you're up.
Dave had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the, since this was capital repair, what's the break between maintenance and capital repair? I mean, a lot of places have a certain dollar amount, like $50,000 or something like that. There's a break between this is maintenance and this is a capital addition.
Elizabeth, do we have an actual threshold?
It's $5,000 or
That's what I
useful
thought.
life,
Okay.
1 year.
So yeah, if it's more than 5,000, then we would be pulling out of this. And just to give you an idea, Elizabeth, you can help me with the actual number. Our balance in our capital repair and replace budget right now is about $3.5 million. All of these projects come out to what was the total on that, Elizabeth? I know I'm putting you on the spot.
Less than $1 million.
Yeah, it was for some reason around $700,000 to $800,000 is what sticks in my mind.
Yep.
So this is it's not insignificant, and I challenge staff to add more to these, because a lot of them are ones that we're going to be putting out contracts for, like the mulch blowing and the engineered wood fiber and stuff like that. But it still leaves a good cushion in our capital repair and replace budget for those unexpected things that come up too, like blowing a motor on a mower and we have to replace it earlier type of thing.
I had one other question about maintenance, since we talked about that and that it got moved from one category to another. In previous conversations, we've talked about being able to identify what it comes after statements that were made at the BCC meeting or wherever it was, but that we would be able to identify what the maintenance upkeep costs are at each of the sites. So that
Yes.
wouldn't just all be glossed together. Where does that fit into this conversation?
Well, that's the output, or that's the end result of if this budget is moved forward, the budget book that you're going to see, the actual printed bound document, is going to be laying those out. So just like what we were showing here, you'll see a page that in that budget book that has just the aquatic center. And so you'll be able to see the personnel associated with that, the utilities. Even though utilities are paid out of maintenance, we'll still be able to show functionally what the utilities are, what our supplies and maintenance. So that way in next year's first quarter budget report, you'll actually be able to see that breakdown by facility function or by division function, because park maintenance overall would again be able to show. And that's where you're going to get your up to the minute to when that report was ended of how much we've expended.
That's great. And so, as you mentioned, then it'll also get down to the per site basis as well, because when you talked about that, almost all parks are a cost center, not a, they don't pay for themselves. So
Right.
To know what different parks cost would be helpful.
We're still developing a lot of those types of numbers, but yeah, that's the ideal goal, is that we start talking much more metrically about what it is that we do.
Thank you.
So does anybody have anything that popped up as we were going through these lists of things that you've heard the community talk about, really would like to see that's more of a maintenance or update or upkeep type of thing, or something that you've thought about as far as it would be great if we could put a little bit of money towards X, Y, or Z. Anita had her hand up.
Go for it, Anita.
Yeah, I don't know about the pollinator beds.
Oh, and I don't know everything about pollinator beds. I know that Tanya in our staff is the expert on it, but essentially they are natural areas that are set aside and planted specifically with pollinating or pollinator plants, so that bees and any other pollinators can come and be able to do their thing.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, she presented once at the Wetlands in Jennings Lodge, but I didn't know there were multiple places where that was happening. So
Yeah,
that's cool.
I think again this year I believe there's 3 additional beds that were
Great.
on the list.
Cool.
That's great.
Thank you.
Joel.
Hey, thank you, Grover. Just a quick question, I guess, about the Milwaukee Community Center signage and other areas or things related to that. I know as far as general office supplies, things like that, they were going to kind of burn through what exists with the previous letterhead and whatnot. I do believe there is some signage though along, I can't remember exactly where, 224, et cetera. Are those items being addressed perhaps even in this year's budget, or are they somewhere in the mix here?
I know that Kevin and I have talked about it. I don't remember what he had told me, but I do believe that there's a process because they're on a main road that we have to go through to get them changed. But it is on our radar. It's not anything that would have been up to over a $5,000 expense. It wouldn't have been on here. But I noticed the same thing when last time I drove out to the Milwaukee Community Center, that the sign on 99 McLaughlin is off, or wherever that one or sorry, not on McLaughlin, the 220. I'm still learning all my roads, but the one that goes right in front of where the Milwaukee Community Center before you turn.
Yeah. No, that's the one I was actually thinking about, 224. But again, yeah, I know they're expensive, but I'm glad to hear they're not over $5,000 also. So.
Yeah. Okay, I think that was the last slide, Elizabeth. Yeah, so did anybody have any questions or want to go back to any slides?
No, I just want to give kudos because if you remember way back when we first had at ncprd.com, there was someone who talked about their concerns about the pathway. Isn't that one of the things that's being taken care of to make the other part of the park so people who are using wheelchairs or walkers can make it through there?
At Alma Myra?
Yeah, I think that's where it was.
Yeah, it's improving that pathway there.
I just want to shine a light on. So that was a request and got it done. Good job.
We're listening. All right. Well, thank you all. Then that's it on here. And again, process wise, I'm going to meet with the county administrator. We'll be bringing this back to you in April, whether it's for approval or whether it's already past that. I think it'll still be for an approval item. We'll know that soon, and we'll continue forward. And I thank everybody. If you have other questions or other thoughts or suggestions, I've got about a week and a half to send them over to me to look and see if I can incorporate them into my meeting with the county administrator.
Super.
Yeah, this is Dave. I'm sorry, I missed, you just reminded me of something about the Altamonte Park up here, that there was a request for something to be done there at the walkway last year, I believe.
Yep.
I'm not sure whatever happened to that.
I am meeting with the Altamonte HOA Safety Committee, I believe is who it is, next Tuesday, I believe. And we'll be going over a lot of that of their requests and try and see what we can do to make improvements out there. There's still a land issue of that property that's next to Altamonte Park, and that's where the big hangup is right now. And so, but I'm going to go and we're going to have a good conversation and really hear what their suggestions or requests are. And again, that may be something that I need to come back and add into the budget if we want to try and do something, if there's stuff that can be done right now. But I am going to their meeting next week, and hopefully we'll get more info from there.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Mike. So that takes care of the draft proposed budget, and there were no more questions. So now it's time for the exciting second quarter report.
All right. And Elizabeth, are you going to screen share that one too then? Perfect. And for this one, we're providing these quarterly reports, which gives you the not up to the minute, because it's not up to today, it's up to the end of the last quarter. So we're really just talking about the dollars from July 1st to December is what this report is. It just takes that long for us to get everything rolled up to be able to present that to you. And so I wasn't going to spend any real time on any particular going through the whole thing. I really wanted to put it out if anybody had anything when they were looking through this, if there was anything that popped out at them of, well, why haven't we spent more in this area, or had a question about anything like that. Grover.
Yes, sir. So I just was curious because when I was looking at this, first of all, I'm thrilled to be getting this, and I certainly understand the timing part of it. So and the time to turn around. But when I look at as an example at the bottom of this page, it says Asset Development Fund. The question is the beginning fund balance. Now, Asset Development Fund refers to what kind of money?
That's that specific fund that has all of our capital expenditure money and capital repair and replace money in it.
Okay. And so we came into this year with just under 7.7 million, just over 7.7 million.
Right.
So is that balance just, I still get confused, and I appreciate the conversation that you and I have had, but I don't know if anybody else is confused about how much we have in money sitting that isn't being allocated, or strike that, isn't being, it isn't directly tied to where it's going to be used. And when you and I talked, I understood, but now there was so much we covered. I can't say as I could replicate it, but I do appreciate. But what I'm not used to is starting with those big of balances in lots of things.
Right.
And because that wasn't the only place that it was a big balance that we started with. Is this the time to address that, or later, or I don't know?
Well, I mean, I guess I would just say to caution not getting the general fund balance confused with the asset fund. The
Okay.
asset fund is where we keep grant revenues that come in, other funding revenues, and it's where we've transferred money into to pay for those capital projects like we're laying out.
Okay.
And so the balances remain high in those, very similar to why the balances remain high in the SDC funds, because we just
fund.
because quite honestly, we haven't spent enough money over the last COVID times, and with Happy Valley and all of that, projects just haven't moved forward. My goal is to start reducing those fund balances, because that's going to mean that we're actually getting projects done and paid for.
Great. And if you go back up to the general fund, which is at the top of this page, it's again, beginning balance is 9 million, and then the ending balance is 12.7. So it is, again, you addressed it, but I just want to point out it was there as well.
Yeah, and that one is specifically because of ARPA funding. So we received the ARPA funding this year, and that's, Elizabeth, I'm correct, and that's why we see that big jump right there, right?
And the revenues, that's correct.
Yeah. And so we've
Okay.
we've gotten some tax revenues already, property tax revenues. We've gotten the ARPA funding, and so that's why you see that big jump.
Cool. And I appreciate what you said just a minute ago about that there. First of all, not everybody was here, and still don't have everybody here, in the sense that, and so it is a matter of addressing, using the money that's coming in and get it out there and put it to work.
Yeah.
The only other thing I had on this particular page is when you go down to SDC funding, it has zone 1 is listed in our current budget. It is listed with its 2 subparts, which is the city limits of Milwaukee, and then the unincorporated urban growth management area, that both are in sub zone 1. And the question is, and it came up in other conversations, which is, at some point a year ago, we talked about establishing priorities for how funding is going to be used. And now we're not distinguishing in zone 1 the 2 funds. There isn't only a 1 fund for zone 1. There is zone 1 under the oversight of the city of Milwaukee, and then there is zone 1 that is unincorporated and not under the oversight of the city of Milwaukee, and that they got combined here without the distinction. Whereas the budget, the current budget we're working under, has them distinguished. So
But we
can I add
can,
some
we can, yeah, we can track them separately, but they are effectively the same fund. So we have
Well-
one zone, one set of zone 1 funds. We just tracked them separately. But effectively, we don't, when we're making SDC expenditures, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but we're not making that distinction between whether a project is in the UGMA or is in zone 1 proper. Is that correct, Heather?
We actually, I would defer to Elizabeth if there's specific tracking at that point. I will say that when we, my understanding of the main reason we have them tracked coming in is because the city of Milwaukee is the one that collects the SDCs within zone 1 Milwaukee, whereas the county is the one that collects SDCs in the zone 1 UGMA. So if they came to us in one lump, we'd have them in one lump, but they come to us in two streams, and then we have to account for that. But Elizabeth, can you address the second part of Grover's question, which was about when we spend, or Mike's clarification?
Well-
We have tracked the projects separately in zone 1 for the city of Milwaukee and for UGMA. So that the projects are when they're determined, are tracked separately.
Thank you.
Okay.
Which raises another question for what you just said, Heather. I do know that for the city of Happy Valley, not that they're here anymore, but the NCPRD or the county collected the SDCs for them. They didn't, and that's how come they got to walk away with $14.3 million. So it is different that Milwaukee had a different arrangement and they collect their own, and they do not, the people who live in the city of Milwaukee do not pay their park fees, SDC fees to, my question should be clear enough.
For the city of Happy Valley and for the city of Milwaukee, the cities do collect it and then transfer it to us.
Okay.
So the city of Milwaukee collects the SDCs on the charges and then sends those monies to us. And that's
Okay,
exactly
good.
what the city of Happy Valley did. And that's why we had a balance of their SDCs collected.
Great. And so that leads me to the reason why it's important for me to keep them separate is it is who makes the decisions on how those funds will be applied. And that was part of the memo back in January of 2021 that specifically gave our next steps. We were going to establish a process to establish priorities, both for the Metro Park sharing and as well as the SDCs. Both of those were referenced in there. And so not knowing and then who makes the decision for the people, because I live in unincorporated and we have suffered, no, strike that. We believe we have suffered at not having a say as how our funds were being spent. And so the city of Milwaukee, they're well represented. And I truly cannot enough times say how much I hope to have the other 4 sub areas have a capacity even faintly resembling what they have in Milwaukee. But in the meantime, so that the wishes of the people whose funds it came from will have a say in it. And that's why it's important for me to distinguish the 2 parts of zone 1. And that's the only place that exists, because zone 2 doesn't have that issue and zone 3 doesn't have that issue.
So Chair, would you like us for our quarter 3 report, we can easily just provide the zone 1 and then the zone 1 UGMA broken out?
I would appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay, done,
Thanks.
easy.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you, by the way, for this. I'm thrilled to get this update.
And again, these are going to evolve and change as we're changing, again, the next year's quarterly reports are going to look far different from these even. So, and hopefully a lot more transparent and easy to understand.
Super. And thank you for your efforts, all of you all. I lived in Mississippi for a while. All y'all.
That's proper English in Mississippi.
You bet. Okay, cool.
So that was it. Unless there's other questions about the quarterly report, we've got several other things on the agenda. So
Okay, next item. Metro local share timeline.
and for that, I am going to turn it over to Heather Cook.
Yes, and I am getting the right thing on my screen so I can share it properly. Hold on just a second. Oh, now I've lost all of you. Hold on just a moment.
And for a point of clarity why she's doing that, by the way, some of the things I say is because I do live in unincorporated and I am a representative for my sub area, not as the chair, but so I should identify myself when I made that comment, but it was pretty self-evident because I live in unincorporated.
Okay, thank you, Grover. Can you see my screen that says timeline for Metro Local Share IGA? Okay.
Dan.
So pretty quick overview, but I wanted to just give you a rough timeline. The timeline's not entirely up to us, but Metro's been they've done a good job clarifying their process. So I think this is a pretty good estimate. As Mike's been saying, it's always going to be staff dependent, but we really want to move through this process because we really want to, get money into projects as soon as it's feasible. So the March and April, this month and next month, we're working to compile a list of potential eligible projects. And basically we do a review with Metro because they kind of want to pre-screen and say, okay, you think these meet the various criteria and filters of the Metro local share that are written into the bond. We see that you think you meet them. We think you meet them. Okay, let's go forward. Please go do some community engagement. So that's what this phase is. And basically, at that point, it's purely staff work to go through and look at our inventory and see what opportunities we might have, not just for any projects, but for projects that meet the local share criteria. And so going forward, I can provide more detail on some of the details of all of those criteria in the bond. But, for example, we can't build sports fields with local share bond money. So we do have to be very selective about the kind of projects that fit the bond. So we can talk about that more in a future session. Particularly when we're doing community engagement with you and other members of the community. Speaking of that, our next step after checking in with Metro about a list is we will be bringing it to the community and to the DAC to review and get input. It may be that we propose, I'm just going to make this up, 4 projects, and we hear that actually there's 3 that are really the priority, or 2 or 5. So we really want to get out into the community. We've been working more and more with specific groups in the community that have been not engaged historically and maybe not feel welcome in the process. So part of what takes us a little bit longer in this process is doing the conversation in a way, fostering the conversation in a way where we have a wide array of voices. So I will be asking you all, as people who are in touch with your sub areas, to please help us get input and spread this word, especially to populations that haven't been historically involved or just might be outright marginalized, either race, ethnicity, identities, etc. Please, we can use all the help we can get. So we'll have some community process around that. And it is a little bit of I hope it's a little bit of a scratching the surface of what we hope to do with the system planning and CIP planning process. So all of these conversations, they build our relationships for the long term, and also why your help is going to be important. So with some fundamental conversations taking place, I hope in May, we will be looking at June for actually bringing a revised project list to the DAC for recommendation. And before we even submit our application to Metro, they also want our governing body to weigh in. So that's the NCPRD board, the BCC sitting as our board. They'll weigh in. It's still not final at that point. It goes to Metro, they review and they say, okay, well, your list looks really good, but we have concerns about this one piece of the project. What can you do here? And then based on that, they have already developed a streamlined process to approve intergovernmental agreements. They already have like a standardized agreement that you just kind of fill in and tweak if you need to. So from there, it should go, fairly quickly. I think they require about 45 days for that review, which is why it says August or October, because that could be a little bit of time depending on where we hit in a month. And then we move to an approved IGA. If for any reason, we have more deliberation, but we want to move forward on other projects, we don't have to propose an amount for the entire amount, local share at once. So we have some flexibility there. Metro's made it very clear that they want to meet us where we are. And they've also made it clear to local jurisdictions that they want us to, really push the boundaries of what we've been able to do so far with community engagement. And we're making a really strong commitment to that. So again, we'll be looking for your help along the way. Use your networks, whatever you can do to help broaden the message. And we'll do it. Part of the way we do that is we will be using the DAC meeting format, but we also will be working with extra meetings as well, because you guys have too much business and individual meetings to fully tackle these things month after month after month. So I know that's a pretty general one. I know everyone's probably very anxious to get into projects list. So am I. But at this point, do you have any other questions? Yes.
Yes, and thank you for that. And I'm thrilled that it's very clear, it makes sense, etc. I want to be clear that we identify the broad spectrum of unheard, underserved populations, because there's been many references and I support all of them. And most people don't know that I spent 25 years working with mostly underserved populations, mostly the teenagers and their parents. So it's tough to reach. And that's just one area. And then there's all kinds of other populations. So language is one, economics is one, but also representation. And that's part of what I brought up about the other half of, just to use as an example, the other half of zone 1, that's all unincorporated. And Maureen happens to live in that area. However, I don't know how much she is getting input from her population. And that's the whole reason that the task force that set up this model on how we recruit the representatives from the 4 sub areas that are unincorporated, it includes every year there's a process to do outreach, to further engaging. So I'm just looking for some way to piggyback on this process and that process, because between now and the end of this fiscal year, we have 4 seats to recruit and fill. 2 of them are people who can opt to be in, but they still have to apply. And there's opportunity for other people to apply, but it's really an opportunity to do outreach. And I would like to make sure we can look how to best utilize that. Thank you so much for all the work you did last year to do this. It won't be as much because we've worked out the bugs, but we still need to do it. And if we could do it in person, I'm looking forward to that. We could do a meeting in May, June, July, August. Each of the 5 sub areas could have an in-person meeting, not decided yet, but I want to make sure that gets heard. And it's been heard by several, but I don't know that everybody here has heard it. So that's my 2 cents on that. And thank you for putting this together.
You are welcome. I'm going to put on my Milwaukee Bay Park update hat. You guys ready for another update?
Woohoo!
Lots of talking from me tonight. Okay, let me see if I can switch screens. I have stopped one share and I'm going to begin another. Okay. Okay, can you see this screen that says Milwaukee Bay Park Design and Cost Update?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, just a few slides here tonight, but I wanted to cover our latest updates with Milwaukee Bay Park. Right now, we're really in the place of getting the project into more design details. As I've mentioned in some updates, we really got into cost estimating and contracting this January. Really kicked off the next phase of the project to try to spend time getting us ready for construction. So we're really getting into refining the design at this phase and better understanding the costs. You might have heard the word schematic design. It's a term designers use. It doesn't necessarily mean a lot to everybody else, but we did a cost estimate at schematic design. It was 3 years ago. So we needed to kind of bring the project up to speed. So we've been doing that work and starting to refine the design. And I'll get to a couple more details on that in a moment. We're also setting up some engagement in April and June when we have some design milestones. And we'll have, at this point, we're planning a general community meeting. We have a date that we're eyeing the week of April 4th. So please stay tuned. It's not, haven't firmed it up yet. But it'll come up quick. We'll be doing a lot of social media and outreach to really have people come to that meeting. It'll probably be a webinar format because we're still using COVID virtual meeting protocols. And then we will also have some specific community meetings with smaller groups, specifically folks who are not as likely to come to larger meetings. So really excited about that work. Again, part of our efforts to really reach in to the community and meet them where they are and hear a lot of rich conversation. We are also still working on getting the final funding IGA fully executed, and we're coordinating with Milwaukee ODOT and the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. So that's really the phase we're in now, between now and June. We will move into actual preparation of construction documents. So then it's a little bit less asking people what they think, moving stuff around, changing shapes of things, and it gets a lot more specific. Now we're actually writing the specs so we can bring someone in and say, hey, can you please now build this? Because now we've told you exactly how it needs to be done. And we'll be doing updated cost estimates all along the way in that process. We're very lucky in this project because we have the contractor already involved in a model called Construction Manager General Contractor. So we'll be quite ahead of the curve in having our costs truthed early. So we're not surprised at the end, and that's very, very helpful. We'll be going through a land use application with the city. And finally, we'll be going into permitting, bidding, and guaranteed maximum price. That all sets us up for breaking ground in the spring of 23. At this point out, I can't promise it'll be February, March, April, exactly when, but that's what we're aiming for, and we're moving pretty swiftly. So design, I mentioned design refinement, and I just want to talk a little bit about what that means. So basically in this phase, we're taking this, great schematic design, and we're saying, okay, this was the design in 2019, what has changed? What are the costs still the costs that we thought they were? How do we align the design with the cost so we can build a project with the funding that we have? So we're streamlining the design. We're looking at ways to save on costs, and we're also looking at the ways to preserve the design intent so that we can honor the intention and goals of the project. There's not a lot of specifics I can share today on exactly what we're doing because it's in process, but the design, I called it a design milestone. That's happening at the very end of this month, and that's what we're bringing to you and the community in April. So you'll have a chance to see updated drawings. We'll be working on updated costs, and I'm really excited to show you guys. That'll be coming up really soon. Let's see. So cost estimate update. This is probably like the news you've all been waiting for. Super exciting. We had a 2019 estimate done by a cost estimator. It estimated a number that you probably have heard before. It may have stuck in your brain of 9.6 million. And that was a combination of two things. It was a combination of a construction cost of 8.2 million and what we call the soft costs and indirect costs of 1.4. Today, our newest estimates as of January have the construction costs at 11.2, which is an increase of 3 million. We have no increase in the design indirect soft costs of 1.4. Those we've been able to keep steady because they're not as subject to cost increases as construction costs are. And essentially, I think you guys have heard a lot about construction costs. Everyone has sort of heard about how much prices have gone up with a lot of things due to a variety of factors that I won't get into. But essentially, these increases are due to cost escalation, which has been quite unprecedented. Anyone that was estimating 3 years ago had no foresight that we would be going into a pandemic and all the ways that would impact our economy. We're also looking at more accurate prices. And this is actually really important because before we had a third-party cost estimator that was really good at their job of looking at what the general price is for X, Y, and Z. But now we have a local contractor doing our cost estimate and saying, actually, I'm in the field, my whole industry is in the field, and we know that lumber or steel or concrete costs this. So we have more accurate prices. And now we also have some fees for the contractor that are fixed in a contract. We had to guess those before, and they are a little higher than we originally expected, again, because we were using, ballpark schematic design estimates. So it's not always the greatest thing to see a cost estimate. It's not usually surprising to see an increase in a cost estimate as the design evolves. So it is fairly normal in that respect. What isn't very normal is the amount of cost escalation we have. The good news, because I'm very steeped in this project, is that we have a great team of the NCPRD folks, city folks, our contractor, and our design consultant, and everyone's really putting their heads together and getting really constructive and very creative about how we maintain the design intent and still deliver a great project. So I'm really excited to show you what is in the works right now, coming out in March. And I want to just quickly highlight next steps. So we'll be, again, presenting a refined design in April, and then we'll be targeting the design to the funding plan of 9.6 with value engineering and a targeted cost approach. In other words, just because it costs 12.3 doesn't mean we're now trying to raise an additional $3 million. We're still looking at it from a perspective of we have a budget and we need to look at how we can design toward that budget because resources are not unlimited. And with that, I think I just wanted to open it up for questions, and Mike's screen popped up. So I didn't know, Mike, if you had any further comments before we opened it up.
No, excellent job, Heather. I would just see if anybody has comments. The design team, I got to be a part of that for the first time. Was that today or yesterday? Man, the days all merged together.
Just today.
Just today. And I mean, what really impressed me is how well everybody shares and works, between several City of Milwaukee staff, several NCPRD staff, several designers, several, just the group was really working toward that common purpose of what can we do to bring what everybody wanted and what everybody's seen initially. How can we make that happen? And I'm pretty darn confident we're going to make it and be able to do that. We just didn't want to show you anything too early in case something changes, but we're pretty darn confident we're gonna reach that target.
Well, somebody else is going to talk. At least I'm talking as myself from my sub area. Just looking at all the different projects that are up in the works, this idea of over a 1/3 increase in cost is pretty startling. And by the way, it's happening all around us. The cost for libraries, the cost for Concord, all of those things keep shooting up like that. And I don't know how to deal with it, but we do need to figure out, and if not, no other time, I'd like to talk about, since many of us have been involved in these projects for like 5, 6, 7 years, and some even longer, where is the place that we're looking for additional funds, and how are we tracking that? I ran nonprofits for 25 years, and we would keep track of the grant opportunities and where we're on that one, and the fundraising opportunities and where we are on that one. And I don't know how that fits in and how we can play a part of being informed about that, as opposed to keep getting just nobody's fault, but just the shock of another 1/3 increase in cost.
Well, yeah, no, and your point, that's the initial reaction when you see that cost increase, Grover, and you're absolutely right. Heather made a point, but she kind of skipped over it and didn't really explain what she, or didn't expound on what she said. We're not going out and trying to seek an additional $3 million. That's not our goal. Our goal is to take that $11.2 million and make conscious choices to honor the intent of the project, but how do we make everything from materials used to refinements and all of that to make that 11.2 million project that's estimated right now fit within that $8.2 million construction budget.
Right.
So we're not trying to go out and seek additional sources, because as you recall, even with so as it is right now, that $9.6 million number, that's our budget that we've been working on for years, we still have a $1.2 million gap. That if we remember the Metro Trails grant application that we just submitted, will go towards covering about 620 some thousand, I believe, of that gap. We're also waiting to hear on another $600,000 amount that we just haven't gotten confirmation on yet. So really, we don't have a large funding gap because we're still trying to design the project down to that $8.2 million construction number. The 11.2 is what it came in at right now, with the materials that were specified in 2019 and all of that. But with that, what we're also trying not to do is we're trying to, or right now we're not cutting out any elements. So
Right.
It's not making choices of what does go in and what doesn't go in. We're still in the what can we do with the existing stuff to just make it less expensive.
Great. And I appreciate that. And I just wanted to make the point between, that's kind of in between of those two is, so one, the value engineering, and the other is there other funds that have not been considered or gone after, whether it be federal earmarks, whether it be local foundations, whether it be, and yes, Metro, but I just don't know what else.
Yeah, anything that has come across our desk. I mean, we had several talks with our legislative rep, not the legislators themselves, the folks that work for the county that help put the asking packages together.
Right.
We did that both for the earmarks as well as legislative requests. We've got money. We've put money in both of those. Neither one of them got any traction. As far as grants, there are a couple of grants that are coming out, like the Land and Water Conservation Fund is coming open. But we were intending on hopefully maybe applying for Concord for that. We're not going to be able to put in more than one location application. But there are, anytime something comes across, if we're aware of it, we're trying to see if we can find a way to make that request fit within our needs.
I got it. And thank you for that. And I in no way mean to imply people aren't doing all. First of all, you keep reminding us how short-staffed you are because you have lots of staff positions that don't have people in them. So I appreciate that. It's just that how can, we be of help and or other community members? I remember that Thelma and his name will come to me in a minute. And they went to the BCC and offered, with a background of getting grants for projects, their help. So they're not going to take it over. They're not going to run with it, but to get some more head into the game is all I want to know. And so we could see where we are on those explorations for other funds.
Yeah, we are being as diligent as we can possibly be of identifying for any of our projects. I mean, trail funding for trails, natural resource conservation funding, project funding. And unfortunately, project funding is one of the more difficult ones because it's usually larger dollar amounts and a lot more complex. But yes, we are diligent. And if anybody out in the community, if I see Thelma's on listening in, I mean, if there are things that we're not aware of, please send me an email, send Heather an email, and let us know, and we will explore it. I mean, I can't tell you how many historic preservation types of things I've been looking at to see if we've got anything that's coming open soon for things like Concord. There's a lot that have not been funding and operating as much also, and they're starting to get, I think, back ramped up. But there was quite a bit that had kind of disappeared. I'm also looking at corporate giving and looking at our reaching out for philanthropic giving to local corporations. But again, a lot of, there's potential out there, but it's building those relationships,
Naming rights, that's what I'm talking about.
Naming rights, yeah. I mean, I can tell you, I had reached out to a couple of larger naming right developer type companies, and their answer was not during COVID, not right now. Not saying no, but just not right now. It wasn't the right time to talk about it.
Sure. The last thing I want to say about that, given the years that we did this, it's like, if you know people who work for that corporation and they're part of the asking as opposed to not, and I have to imagine out of our, 400 and some odd thousand, well, in NCPRD, it's only 180, 105, but there's got to be people that cover almost every base. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. I really appreciate it. One of the things that, so as a practitioner, one of the things to struggle with that a lot of people don't know is, there's a lot of competition for these grants. And federal grants, like the agency I work for, we won't go for federal grants because it actually is cost prohibitive to go for a federal grant. There's tons of money out there, but you need tons of staff and tons of money to pay that staff to do all it.
Yeah,
It's really frustrating. And that's why I kind of keep talking about like the system plan that sets us up to be eligible for grants. And then also getting our funding under control and figuring out how do we do a bond that then helps us leverage some of these grants. If we're going after grants and we don't have those two things, we're just kind of asking, help us, but we don't have all the legs of the stool. So
right.
Yep. Well said. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you very much, Heather. That was great. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So next item would be Concord update.
And I didn't have anything prepared really. All I was the Concord update, Milwaukee Bay Park update, financial update. These ones that you see with the asterisk on the agenda are meant to be kind of standing updates. So they'll be on every agenda. What I can say about Concord from a staff side is we continue to have meetings trying to refine and answer questions that have come in from the community, taking input. And so there was the task force meeting. Since our last meeting, there's been a library board meeting. What's the other library group, Grover? I always forget.
Well, there's a library board meeting, and then the other one was the actual Concord Property Library Planning Task Force.
Right. But wasn't there a third group that also met about the?
We had an impromptu group that doesn't have any official title, and we're the kind of the ones that been behind the scenes for years.
So coming full circle, since you all last met at the last meeting and talked about Concord, the other groups have also all met. There is another task force meeting next Tuesday night for them to kind of consolidate thoughts and potentially take an action. But really, we're just moving forward, trying to just keep on top of getting documents and creating good visuals for as good of decision making as possible. Overall intent is that the work group, the staff group, Cindy Becker and Jason and myself and everybody that's been, and Mitzi that have been involved in this, our intent based on direction from the county administrator is to try and take a decision to the board in April, if possible. So that way we can have a clear decision and be able to move on, because especially for the library that's got ARPA funding potentially tied up, there's timelines that things need to be spent. And so we're trying to be very deliberative and make sure we get all the public input and comments from all the different bodies. But ultimately we are coming hopefully to a point where the board will be asked to make a decision on how to move forward.
Yes, thanks. Go ahead, Anita.
Well, because the BCC has asked us for a clear message about how to proceed with Concord, a number of us have been working on that. And so far, the library board and the Concord Task Force and the Oak Grove Community Council are all in agreement that the library should be separated from the existing school building. And so tonight, I'm hoping that the DAC will add our voices to that and take this, so this message can go as soon as possible to the BCC and they can see how the momentum has built in that direction. So after a discussion, or I guess I could make a motion and then we could have a discussion.
That's the best way to legislatively do that, is make a motion and then discuss it.
Okay. So my motion is the DAC recommends that the Oak Lodge Library, with its independent funding, be developed right away as a freestanding building with the park designed concurrently to complement the library. And I sent that text to Jessica in case, I don't know if it needs to be on the screen. Is there a second?
Well, I'll second. I beat you. Go ahead, Deborah, you can second. Deborah seconds.
And so
Okay,
now generally you would just open it up for discussion then.
Right, motion and a second, so time for discussion. Well, I only have one thing to add, and it's not in different than that, but the Jennings Lodge CPO will be meeting on the 24th, and it will be an item to be discussed there. But I do appreciate that all of the other groups have met and have clarified that the separate is probably the best strategy. We'll be partners, we'll be neighbors, but the funding sources are separate. So that's the important thing. And until your hand's still up, Dave, you're up.
Okay, I'm not sure I have a dog in this fight, but it's not really clear how this affects the Parks Department and how does it affect the rest of the project. I'm not sure what's going to happen with the community center. You know, there's different options there, and I think you mentioned there's two options about where to put the new building. If it's a third, separate option, where does it go to? And I don't know, does that have to be decided too, or I'm not sure where that fits in the motion.
Well, I'd like to comment at least to the one part of what you just said, that what we've been doing in all the other meetings is finding where there is agreement. And then the things that are not agreed, then they don't get included in what we're speaking for. And what Anita did say was separate. And she didn't talk about, but in the other ones, I'll talk about that it'll be sustainable and that it'll be in harmony with the park. So those are all things that she said, more or less. And yet the next steps, there'll be more people working on that. And then Mike, you had your hand up there. You wanted to say something?
Yeah, just to give a bit of context so that everybody understands what Dave was asking about, what the implication is. So whether the building being separated or connected is really the big decider. Where it is on the property, that'll get refined, just like what kind of features we'll have in the playground or how many trees will be planted in the parks. That'll all get defined once that decision's meant or made to separate or go with a different option. What it means for the community center is we have basically the money to pay for our part of that decision, which is paying NCPRD is bearing the cost of the playground and all the park and land development around the entire property, as well as sharing the costs of the civil dirt work and then sharing the costs of the new parking lot. And so all of that, as well as probably depending on where the building does get located, could also include some money in the budget for a new elevator and that new entry in that shared plaza area. But that may change if the building location is relocated, depending on what factors are defined. But overall, we have the money in budgets right now to pay for that part of the whole project. What would happen next is a community engagement process to refine what the community center as a standalone thing wants to be, and what kind of rooms want to be developed, and where our capital project priorities would be. There's a few needed things right away. We need to deal with the seismic aspects of the building, which I believe we've figured out we can do mostly through repairing and replacing the roof and using tie-ins that improve seismic stability because the roof needs to be repaired or replaced anyways. It's an old roof. Same thing, we need air handling systems, some way to exchange air in the building and heat and cool it. It's an old boiler system. So there's still some infrastructure needs that we're not dealing with in this first phase. So the first community engagement would be kind of like what Heather was talking about with everything else and what Grover's saying of getting consistency. It's really identifying what those needs are at the beginning and then prioritizing and figuring out how we fund them through a future revenue bond, through an overall geo bond that we get after we've got our systems plan chugging along. But we'll at least be able to identify where the community's priorities are, both in aesthetics and features, and also identifying those infrastructure needs, and then move on from there. Did that
Thank you,
answer your
Mike.
question, Dave?
Yeah, thanks.
Perfect.
Deborah, you're up.
Well, I think the important thing about Annika's motion is that if we can agree just on the basics that the library should be separate, a separate project from the Concord School, then we can actually begin to start dealing with the library, start planning. Her motion doesn't say what exactly the library is going to look like or anything specific, just that it be separate. And when it's separate, we've got, as Michael said, there's money there, there's money that is committed. We can actually start moving forward on that without further delay. And we've all been waiting for this for a very long time, which I think is why there's really extremely strong consensus among the different groups in our area that we separate the library so we can move forward.
Thank you. Annika, you up again?
Just to say that was beautifully put, Deborah. Thank you very much.
Yes, I agree. Okay, any other discussion? Yes, Ryan.
Just one more quick question, Michael. I think you answered this to me before, but I kind of forgot. Is the land, so was the land purchased or given to the district for like $1, or was it actually? And if so, is the library going to pay for a portion of the land, like share that cost essentially? You're on mute.
We acquired that property along with the Clackamas School in Wichita and a cash part in the Hoodview transfer over. And so it's hard to say, you know, we didn't get it for $1. It was all part of kind of a package deal. With that said, there is money in the Concord project overall that is a contribution from the library to us for consideration of the land use. There's other details that are going to have to be figured out, but just for clarity, I think it's $300,000 is what that amount is. We're still going to have to work out an IGA between NCPRD and the county about, you know, long-term land implications and use and you know, things like that, just for everybody's protection. But yes, there is a consideration in there from the library over to us for the land they're using.
So I guess what I'm getting is that this kind of makes things a little tidier, and I'm looking right at Anita. It sounds like this makes things just a little bit tidier.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more expensive in some ways, but tidier, cleaner, and gets things moving.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Simplifies the situation and gets things moving for sure.
Okay. Like it.
Okay, so we can, so somebody want to call the question, or how does that work? We just thumbs up?
You can just call for the roll and have Jessica do a roll call.
Okay, Jessica, would you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Anita?
Yes.
David?
Yes, excuse me, yes.
Deborah?
You're muted, Deborah.
Yes.
Desi,
Yes.
Joel,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
and Grover.
Yes.
Okay, unanimously passed.
Yes. Thank you, thank you, thank
Maureen.
you.
Don't forget Maureen.
Yes,
Oh,
thank
oh,
you.
sorry.
That's all right. I'm here in the dark,
Yeah,
Sorry, Maureen.
That's all right, fine. I'm in a complete agreement. I'd like to push that project forward, yeah.
now it's really unanimous. Thanks, Maureen. Super. That does raise a question that's interrelated to this. In some previous meetings, there was discussion about having joint meeting between, like we did one, which was the DAC and the task force and the library board. And the real question is does this body wish to be included in a subsequent meeting to that, of that nature? If you want to, nobody wants to exclude you, but case in point, if Deborah and Anita, who both will likely participate however we do it, because Deborah's on the library board, I'm on the library board, so we get it 2 ways to Sunday. So does this body, is the question to consider, want to be included in a joint meeting in the future to discuss more of the same that we're talking about here, about how the library is going to get placed? And Deborah, your hand's up.
Right. I think the important thing from what I gathered is that the BCC wants to know that the community feels strongly one way or another, and is speaking mainly with one voice. And I think we are speaking with one voice. Every group that has brought this up has essentially unanimously said they want the library separate. So basically we can get this thing moving at long last. I don't see, I mean, I'm speaking as a member of this board and as the chair of the library board. I don't see a point in having yet another meeting when we've all pretty much said the same thing. If there were some dissension, if there were things that needed to be further worked out or discussed, then I would say, yes, let's have another meeting, but I don't see that. So I don't see the point in having yet another meeting. We're going to be having lots of meetings anyway.
Right. Okay, and that's actually in line with what I was saying, but I don't want to have people in this body be excluded because there is going to be another task force meeting and there is going to be another library board meeting and there is going to be a CPO meeting, all of which will have a chance to talk about this. It's just whether the folks here want to be pulled into that or not. And I'm concurring that I don't see a reason, but I don't want anybody to feel excluded. So unless somebody on this body besides Deborah and myself and Anita want to be in a future meeting about this, unless I hear somebody say, yes, we want to do that, we will take that there was not a hue and cry to be included in a joint meeting. Dave, your hand's up.
Yeah, my understanding was what you said. We were invited. I mean, we don't have to come, but we're welcome to come and listen like this meeting next Tuesday, which I wasn't aware of course, but I might be interested in listening into what the community is saying.
Super. Yeah, all of the meetings are public. Well, most of them aren't, but all the meetings that I've talked about are public. So yes, good. So yeah, we don't want anybody to feel excluded, but I don't want to have a meeting that y'all are, required to attend. That's all. That's all. So optional. Moving right along.
Maybe just an invite and then, not required. That would be great.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Cool. And that would be if there is another joint meeting, because like I said, the task force, which includes a lot of the library members and members on this body, as well as then the library board, which includes a lot of people in this group and on the task force, are going to be meeting anyway. So I don't know that there'll be another subsequent meeting. That's the only thing. If there is one, y'all get invited. If you're invited to any of them, other public meetings anyway. Okay, good. Can we move on? Nobody said no. Good. Next item, SDC methodology update.
Turning it back over to Heather for a quick update on where we're at.
Yes, I will share my screen again.
Woohoo. Oh,
We love timelines, as
Try
you
to hold
can
the
see.
try to hold the cheering. Okay, so can you see a SDC methodology timeline?
ah,
This one looks different. I'm trying to see if you guys are paying attention, but this one's called SDC methodology. You guys can see that?
no.
Okay. So basically, this is an update. We have been in a phase of gathering information for the SDC methodology. This is a little more work than I had originally anticipated, in part because we had to clean up some of our inventory information in order to get it over to FCS. I'm actually still finishing up that process. And we have the SDC project list that we talked about back in December, I believe it was. And I'm still refining some cost info on that. So we did get some updated population information. These are the sort of inputs that go into the methodology. It's fairly complex, and we will have a chance to tweak it if we've made any errors, but we want to try to get it, pretty robust in time for you before we bring it to you for review. So we're still in the process of getting that over to FCS. And then we'll be looking at bringing that to the DAC a little bit, just a little bit delayed from when we get it over to FCS, because they have to kind of set up the methodology and run it. And we'll be developing that draft for your review. We'll be presenting that methodology and a revised interim CAP to you. And then we'll be presenting that for a recommendation. So that's in that period of March through June. That's when you really get to start diving into some of these spreadsheets. And I'll have to kind of talk a little bit about how much time we need for those meetings. I think that it tends to get pretty technical, and we just have to we'll have to check the pulse of the group a little bit later on how much time you want to allocate for that, whether we prefer to have a special meeting at some point. But the intention is for you to understand it to a sufficient degree that you can ask questions and we can go back and make any necessary changes. Part of what we want to see, quite honestly, is, what is that methodology? What choices are made so that we know why the numbers are coming out the way they are, and what are the numbers? Have we made the right assumptions? Those are the things we want to be really transparent about so that we can make good decisions going forward. So once we get to a DAC recommendation in that March through June period, we would actually be bringing it to the board for a presentation, and that starts a 90-day period where we have noticing. We bring the ordinance to a public hearing for board adoption. The current plan is to concurrently bring a CIP to the board for adoption. And so we're trying to kind of weave those together because the CIP list can parallel the SDC project list. They're not exactly the same, but we think there's a pretty good parallel process to get us to at least an interim CIP until we can do our more exhaustive CIP update. So we have this going out till about September. If I can accelerate it, I will. If we need to let that go a little bit to get the proper noticing, we'll do that as well. But this is our current plan. And I know it's been a while since we've discussed in detail. I also know it's getting kind of late, but if you have any questions, I'm here.
Great, thank you, Heather. Any questions? Excellent. And yes, the idea whether it's a special meeting, since given the depth, I actually attended one of the SDC meetings way back, years ago, and yeah, it's juicy and deep and yada yada, and I love that stuff, but not everybody does. So if we did a special meeting, you don't get dinged if that's not your cup of tea, because the decision won't be made then we could bring it into one of these meetings and carry it forward for those who don't want to suffer. Okay, good. So I don't think we have to decide that now. Anything else on the SDC methodology?
No,
Seeing
Chair.
none, moving up. Was that no or yes?
I said no, Chair, sorry.
Okay, cool. Now we're talking about an NCPRD funding update.
And we don't have anything to add more than doing our budget updates. This was, again, just the standing item that's going to be on everyone. So unless anybody had any other questions about it.
I do. I actually alluded to it before, and I don't want to take a long time. If I go over a minute, let me know. All I'd like to look at is a way that, again, that we can see what efforts are being made to find additional funding, not like over somebody's shoulders, but just like a quarterly or a semi-annually or whatever. And then where we are on that process, that's piece one. But piece two, we did, what is it called? Public administration, Masters of Public Administration. We got my little nonprofit. I mean, we're much smaller, but we had hundreds and hundreds of people working with. We got incredible from San Jose State University interns, and I couldn't believe the amount of work they did, and they loved it. So do we take on interns for doing some of that kind of work?
We have, and I am trying to get us interns potentially, but unfortunately, most interns have already chosen their summer internship by now. Right. And so, but that doesn't mean that there's not, fall interns and all of that. So yeah, I've got ties in with several of the Parks and Recreation departments within the different universities, especially ones that are fully accredited Parks and Rec universities. So it is my intent.
Right. And I just want to expand that. We were not we worked well within a municipal government, but we were still a nonprofit, and we had interns that were in the public and government affairs, public administration, sorry. And it worked for what they needed as well. So I don't know that the work that we're doing about getting grants or looking these things is necessarily Parks and Rec limited. That's all. I've said that. I'm probably over my minute. I'll stop. I'd like to hear how that turns out. Thank you. Anything else on NCPRD funding? Okay. Public comment. So
we don't have anybody with their hands up, but if anybody wants to speak, we do have somebody. Elizabeth Goebel and then Thelma Hagen-Miller have put their hands up.
Super.
Yes, this is Elizabeth Goebel, and I am delighted that this group decided to recommend a separate library and taking care of the community center problems a little later, because I think the library needs to come first. Even though I run the community theater here in Milwaukee, and we would love to have a community center with a performing space, but the library being separate and coming first really matters to me. And I live in unincorporated Clackamas County for more than 32 years. I don't want to talk any longer. You guys are wonderful to look at all these budgets. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
And Elizabeth, if you would, I would love to chat with you. Feel free to email me, please.
Sure.
Cool. So now, Thelma Hagen-Miller, identify yourself and speak to us.
Okay, here I am, Thelma Hagen-Miller, and I am the sole publisher of the Citizens Informed and Aware, known as the CIA newsletter. And I know that the question of how do you find out about some of these meetings has come up tonight. These meetings are always listed in my newsletter, not only the date, time, and place, but how to link to them and how to look them up afterwards. So tonight I did try to find you guys on the, what was it, Grover, DAC at NCPRD.com.
That's how you communicate to us.
It doesn't work. I'll tell you that right now. And I found
Okay.
out why it doesn't work, because in your system, you've got commas between each of the names. So that's a Parks District and a technical thing that needs to be worked out. I tried it several times, and that's what it came back and told me, that you've got commas between the names. But I now have, which I didn't have before, the emails for each of you individually. And with your blessings, I will add you to the CIA newsletter, which does list all of these meetings and how to get to them. And so that's one item that I have. The other one is that we, the citizens out here, that said that we were going to be looking for other money. We called it other money, besides just taxpayers' money. And we are working on that. I've got several people out there looking into that, not to the point yet where I can talk to you, Mike, about anything, but we're not giving up on it. We do not feel that we should overlook any of those other monies. And so we've got several different aspects of that we're looking into. And we have the Concord Partnership, which is a 501c3 organization, is working with us on this. So I just want you guys to know that we're not giving up on that part of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Thelma. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, I just want a clarifying question from Michael or the district. So our emails, part of the process was the general email was going to be something that the community could connect to, that then would be a pass-through for our private emails. Is that true, or is our private email going to be published? Because we don't have a county email like just for an advisory board. So I thought that was a pass-through and that we would respond, if that makes sense.
Jessica, you'd have to answer that because I'm not sure quite how the email chain. I can say that we've just recently in the last couple of days been hearing about emails that are getting bounced back. And we've got our IT folks looking at that. But Jessica, can you answer the other?
Yeah, so the DAC at ncprd.com should just be the email that people are seeing. I don't believe it opens it up to see whoever gets that. I think that's kind of a pass through where it goes to that and then it sends it, kind of forwards it to everybody else that's on that list.
I guess I'm just wondering if our private email is going to be used for public purposes. If that's the case, then might want to get a different email.
My understanding is people should not, I mean, if you've got your email out there and they know how to email you, but if somebody types in DAC at ncprd.com, they're not able to see who that is going to in their emails. Yeah. That's that pass through. It comes through the county's email system, and then it says anybody that's on this other list gets sent any of those emails. And for some reason there's a hiccup in there where some people are getting things, other people are not. Some people are getting reply messages of why not, some aren't. And so I think there's something going on in the email system itself. But
and I guess my preference is that my private email stays private unless we're going to get a county email. I don't want it published everywhere. So
I would only add that, and you're probably already aware of this, Ryan, and everyone else, but if you're replying to those DAC mass emails, your email will be exposed.
Yeah, and that's why I don't reply. Yeah.
No, I get it. I just wanted to make sure everyone's on the same page.
Okay, thanks.
Cool. Any other public comment?
We don't have anybody else with their hand up.
We're closing public comment, and now we have DAC member reports. Anita.
I know it's kind of late, so I'm not going to do a full report, but I'm excited that Elizabeth Goebel was here tonight and that Michael was talking about his experience in theater before we started our official meeting. And so getting the New Century Players together with Michael Bork is an exciting thing. And then we could have a resident theater company at the community center.
Great. Thank you, Anita. Yes, Joel.
Yeah, I'll try to be brief too. And again, I'm also totally astounded by all the pots that Michael's got his hands in. I'm looking forward to seeing him up on the stage. But I think it's in the district report. I'm going to send the link out to everyone. But it is the Milwaukee Community Center's March for Meals fundraiser this month. Pretty important one. Raising money for the Meals on Wheels program, and Bob's Red Mill again is matching up to $10,000 for donations collected through April, I believe. I will send the link out, but you can make donations online or at several retailers, businesses in our community. So I'd encourage everyone to do that. The only other thing I wanted to ask or kind of throw out there is in light of the indoor mask mandates being lifted this Saturday, what is the plan for NCPRD directly, or at least this group? Because I know I'm on a NC or a county board with the Milwaukee Community Center. We're meeting in person and have been for months. Is there a plan to get us meeting in person here soon too? And that is it. Thanks.
Thank you.
And if you would like me to reply, the mask mandate,
Sure.
we're going to be following the state guidelines, and so after or starting Saturday, use of masks indoors is not required. It is still an option for people that feel more comfortable, and that includes staff and all of our operations. To the second part of the question, yes, I want us to try and get back to in-person meetings as quickly as we can, and we'll have some more information. It may be as early as next month's meeting.
Cool. At the Concord Center or at the Aquatic Center?
TBD, because we've got to figure out how we can do, we still are now going to be required post-pandemic to do hybrid meetings. So we still have to allow for people to join on video and through phone. So we've got to figure out if we've got all the right hookups to do that at Concord or where we would do those.
Okay, great, thanks.
We'll figure that out.
Anita.
I think I can do two quick other things, just events. The Trolley Trail Fest is going to be July 16th, and it's basically generated by Historic Downtown Oak Grove, a nonprofit, but NCPRD is going to be helping out with some of the publicity. And it has live music, food, booths for nonprofits and agencies and craftspeople. And then there's something new on the horizon, a Hispanic cultural celebration. I don't know when the date is, but it's something that NCPRD has created. Correct?
Thank you. Heather. Hello, Heather.
That was something, I don't know how I raised my hand.
Okay,
my apologies. I must be, I don't know, having like actions that I'm not aware of here. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. Any other comments from DAC member reports? Again, because of time, I won't do what I wanted to do, but it will keep. So seeing none, we'll go to the next item, DAC monthly report.
Again, for time, I hope everybody has had a chance to read through our monthly reports. They give you a good idea of kind of our day-to-day functions. The only thing I wanted to add was that we are trying to put together a separate NCPRD board meeting, an evening meeting separate from their normal business meetings. We have not set the date on it yet. We're shooting for late March or early April. And the intent of this would be to have those separate meetings on a quarterly basis. And so how that'll all evolve, we're going to be figuring out. But we definitively have identified the need to have a chance to meet separately with the board to talk specifically about NCPRD issues. So as that develops and as we get a date, we'll let everybody know. It's not a joint meeting with the DAC, it's their separate agenda, but we'll let everybody know when that's happening. And that with that, unless anybody has any questions about our monthly report.
I don't see any hands going up. I did want to comment, though. I do look forward to it. How will we integrate our meeting with them? So if it's their meeting and we're there, could that count for that meeting, or we have some, don't have to decide that, but that's something to be addressed because.
Yep.
Good. Enough said about that one. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Our future dates, April agenda submission deadline is March 16th, 5 p.m. Next agenda setting meeting is going to be March 21st, and the next DAC meeting is April 13th. And then it says the joint Concord thing, and we already talked about that. We're not having that, it seems to me, unless you all get invited to other meetings, if I understood that correctly. Good. All right. Well, looking for the gee whiz way to say this. Probably I can't find it fast enough, so I'll just say, any further business? Seeing none, thank you all. We are adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.